When my son, my own flesh and blood, spat in my face that I wasn't welcome at his Father's Day dinner because I'd taint his wife's high-class gathering, my heart shattered like glass under a boot. I poured my life savings, $216,000, every cent of my veteran's pension, into their Victoria mansion, only to be tossed aside like garbage. The pain burned deeper than any wound from Afghanistan. I stumbled to my truck, rage choking my throat, and made one call. Their mortgage? Canceled. That was just the spark. If you've ever been betrayed by those you die for, stay tuned, you won't believe what I unleashed next. Subscribe and tell me your story in the comments. My name's James Campbell, a retired Canadian Forces veteran who survived 2 tours in Afghanistan, but nothing cut deeper than my son Ethan's betrayal. For 6 years, I poured my heart into his life, taking a second mortgage on my modest Victoria cottage to fund the $75,000 down payment for his Oak Bay mansion. Every month, $3,000 my hard-earned pension went to their mortgage, keeping their 300 square meter dream home afloat. I thought I was building a legacy for my boy, like the one my late wife Emily and I dreamed of. But last week, I sat on their leather sectional, the one I paid for, suggesting a Father's Day barbecue with my famous maple-glazed ribs. Ethan's face tightened. "Dad," he said, eyes darting to the floor, "Lauren's parents want a private Father's Day. You wouldn't fit in with their crowd." The words sliced through me, sharper than any shrapnel. I stared at the cedar deck out back, the one I'd shelled out $20,000 for, and felt my chest cave. "Fit in?" I asked, voice shaking. "What does that mean, Ethan?" he mumbled. "You know, their sophisticated vibe. It's just easier without you." Lauren swept in, her $1,200 boots clicking on the hardwood I'd financed. "James, let's not make a scene. My parents, Margaret and Robert, have standards. Standards. My sacrifices, my service, my love reduced to an inconvenience." I stood, the weight of 20 years in uniform pressing down, and walked out, the Pacific breeze cold against my rage. As I drove away from Ethan's Oak Bay mansion, the Pacific sunset bled red across Victoria's skyline, mirroring the fury in my chest. I'm James Campbell, a 62-year-old veteran who gave 20 years to the Canadian Forces, who carried shrapnel scars from Afghanistan, who thought family was worth every sacrifice. But Ethan's words, "You wouldn't fit in," echoed like a grenade blast in my skull. 6 years ago, when Ethan and Lauren begged for help to buy their 300 square meter dream home, I didn't hesitate. I refinanced my seaside cottage, taking a $150,000 second mortgage to cover their down payment and renovations. Every month since, $3,000 of my pension, $216,000 total, flowed into their mortgage, draining my savings faster than a coastal tide. I skipped new clothes, ate canned soup to save a loonie, and put off fixing my leaking roof, all so they could live like royalty. For what? To be told my campfire cooking and war stories were too low class for their Father's Day. Back at my cottage, the walls closed in, lined with photos of Emily and me, her smile a ghost now, gone 5 years. I'd kept Ethan's world spinning after her death, thinking it's what she'd want. But Lauren's voice, sharp as a bayonet, cut through that illusion. I replayed our last phone call, 2 days after Ethan's rejection. "James," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "my parents, Margaret and Robert, expect a certain caliber of company. Your army anecdotes and that greasy barbecue food don't mesh with their refined tastes." I gripped my phone, knuckles white. "Refined tastes?" I shot back. "Like the granite countertops I paid $25,000 for? Or the cedar deck you host your brunches on?" She laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "Don't be so dramatic. We appreciated your help when we needed it, but things change. We've moved up. You haven't—" The line went dead, but her words lingered, each one a fresh wound. I walked to my kitchen, where my old service medals hung above the sink, glinting under the flickering bulb I couldn't afford to replace. Every dollar had gone to their lifestyle: Lauren's $1,500 designer coats, Ethan's new SUV when his job hit a rough patch. I'd been their bank, their safety net, while they sneered at my calloused hands and working-class roots. I thought of Margaret, Lauren's mother, who'd visited last summer. She'd sat on their leather sofa bought with my credit card and said, "James, you're a good man, but you're simple. Our family values sophistication, culture, not war stories and plaid shirts." I'd swallowed my pride then for Ethan's sake. But now, as I stood alone, the memory burned. "Simple," I muttered, staring at my reflection in the window. A man who'd led men through combat, who'd built a life from nothing, called simple by people living off my sacrifices. Then came the final blow. Ethan texted me the next morning, his words cold as a Victoria winter. "Dad, just stay away for a bit. Lauren's parents are particular about their image. It's not personal." "Not personal?" My heart pounded, each beat a hammer against my ribs. I'd given them everything: $216,000, my retirement dreams, my pride, only to be erased from their perfect picture. I sat at my kitchen table, pulling out bank statements, the numbers blurring through my anger. 6 years, 72 payments, $3,000 each gone. The new skylights in their dining room, $10,000. The hardwood floors, $15,000. All funded by a man they deemed unfit for their table. I thought of Emily, how she'd spent her final days planning a future for Ethan, how she'd trusted me to protect him. I'd failed her, letting Lauren and her parents treat me like dirt. I called Ethan, hoping for a shred of remorse. "Son," I said, voice low, "do you know what I've given up for you?" He sighed, impatient. "Dad, we're grateful, okay? But Lauren's family has standards. They don't get your vibe. Just come by after Father's Day, maybe." The call ended, and I stood frozen, the phone heavy in my hand. Standards, vibe, words that masked their contempt for my life, my service, my heritage. The rage built, a storm ready to break. I wasn't just a father scorned, I was a soldier disrespected, a man pushed too far. Something had to give, and it wouldn't be me this time. Ethan's cold text, "Dad, just stay away," hung over me like a storm cloud rolling off the Pacific, heavy and suffocating. As I sat in my truck on Dallas Road, the waves pounding Victoria's breakwater below. The roar of the ocean couldn't silence the agony tearing through me, more brutal than any shrapnel I'd taken in Afghanistan. I, James Campbell, a 62-year-old veteran who'd stared down death in Kandahar, was nothing to my own son, a discarded relic, unfit for their Father's Day because my war stories and calloused hands clashed with Lauren's polished world. I'd poured $216,000 of my pension, a second mortgage on my seaside cottage, years of scraping by on canned soup, into their 300-square-meter Oak Bay mansion. Yet, I was an outcast, my sacrifices mocked by their sophisticated vibe. But the betrayal I uncovered next didn't just break me, it obliterated every shred of hope I had left. The day after Ethan's text, I drove to their mansion, my heart hammering like a machine gun, desperate to understand why my son had turned his back. Maybe there was a mistake, a chance to mend things. I parked on their manicured street, the cedar hedge I'd paid $5,000 to install mocking me with its perfection. I knocked, my breath uneven. Lauren opened the door, her face a mask of irritation, her $1,200 silk scarf fluttering like a flag of privilege. "James, why are you here?" she snapped, her voice sharp as a coastal wind. Inside, I saw their dining room, its chandelier $8,000, my credit card casting light on a new addition, a framed photo of Lauren's parents, Margaret and Robert, at a Whistler gala, smiling smugly. My stomach churned. "Where's the picture of Ethan's grad?" I asked, my voice cracking. It was a photo from his Camo Sun college ceremony, me in my best suit, Emily radiant beside me, her cancer in remission then. Lauren smirked, brushing her manicured nails against the doorframe. "Oh, that? It's in storage. Didn't fit our new aesthetic. Margaret says it's too sentimental for our guests." Sentimental. That photo was my lifeline, Emily's smile, Ethan's pride, my family whole for one fleeting moment. Now, it was buried in a basement to make room for Margaret's ego. My vision blurred, tears stinging like salt in a wound. "You erased my family," I whispered, my hands trembling. Lauren stepped closer, her eyes cold as a Victoria winter. "James, don't be so dramatic. Emily was lovely, but she stayed in her lane. She didn't demand to be center stage like you do." Her words were a bayonet to my chest, twisting with every syllable. Emily, who'd spent her final months knitting Ethan a scarf, who'd whispered his name with her last breath, was dismissed as a side character in their upscale drama. My legs felt like jelly, but I stood my ground. "I paid for this house, Lauren. Every wall, every light. You don't get to bury my wife's memory." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "James, we've outgrown your little contributions. My parents expect elegance, not your outdated soldier pride. Go home." I stumbled back to my truck, the Pacific's chill biting my face, my tears mixing with the salt air. Ethan appeared at the window, his silhouette faint, but he didn't come out, didn't call my name. His silence was louder than Lauren's venom, a final nail in the coffin of our bond. I drove home, the 10-kilometer stretch a blur of pain. In my cottage, I collapsed into my armchair, the one Emily and I had reupholstered together, its faded fabric a reminder of her warmth. My service medals hung above, glinting accusingly. I'd fought for Canada, for my son, only to be cast out like a broken tool. Lauren's words, "stayed in her lane," echoed, each one a fresh stab. My family, my sacrifices, my love for Ethan, all reduced to sentimental clutter in their perfect world. The grief was a tidal wave, drowning me, heavier than any burden I'd carried in uniform. I gripped the armrests, my knuckles white as driftwood, rage simmering beneath the sorrow. I wasn't just a father betrayed, I was a soldier dishonored, a man pushed beyond breaking. The agony of Lauren's words, "Emily stayed in her lane," seared into my soul like a branding iron. But as I sat in my Victoria cottage, the Pacific wind rattling the windows, a switch flipped inside me. I, James Campbell, a 62-year-old Canadian Forces veteran who'd faced hell in Afghanistan, wasn't going to let my son's family bury me alive. The grief that had crushed me last night, when I learned they'd replaced our family photo with their smug gala portrait, hardened into resolve sharper than a bayonet. My hand steadied, my heart no longer a bleeding wound but a drumbeat of purpose. I'd poured $216,000 of my pension, a $150,000 second mortgage on my cottage, into their 300 square meter Oak Bay mansion, $366,000 total, more than I'd ever saved for myself. I'd eaten instant noodles, skipped vacations, let my roof leak, all so they could flaunt their cedar hedges and chandelier-lit brunches. No more. They'd mocked my service, erased Emily's memory, and cast me out of Father's Day. It was time to take back my power. I marched to my desk, the oak table Emily and I had salvaged from a Sydney garage sale, and yanked open the drawer. Inside were years of bank statements, a paper trail of my sacrifices, $3,000 monthly transfers, 72 payments, $216,000 gone, the $8,000 chandelier, the $5,000 cedar hedge, the $1,200 silk scarves Lauren wore like trophies, all my money, my sweat, my pride. I grabbed my phone and dialed my lawyer, Sarah McLeod, a no-nonsense Victoria native who'd helped me with Emily's estate. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady as a sniper's aim, "I need to stop the automatic payments to Ethan's mortgage. Can you make it happen today?" She paused, her keyboard clicking. "James, that's $3,000 a month to Scotiabank, right? 6 years running?" I nodded, though she couldn't see. "Yeah, I'm done being their ATM." She didn't hesitate. "I'll draft the paperwork to cancel it and notify the bank. It'll be done by noon." I exhaled, the weight of 6 years lifting like fog off the Strait of Juan de Fuca. "Thanks, Sarah. One more thing, can you look into reclaiming my equity in their house?" Her voice sharpened with interest. "That's a bigger move, James. I'll dig into it." "You sure?" I glanced at my cracked kitchen tiles, the ones I couldn't afford to fix. I've never been surer. But stopping the payments wasn't enough. Lauren's parents, Margaret and Robert, were arriving tomorrow for their precious Father's Day celebration, expecting me to roll out the red carpet. That afternoon, Lauren texted, her words dripping with entitlement. "James, we need you to stock our bar for the weekend. Margaret and Robert expect top-shelf scotch, not your cheap beer." Cheap beer. I'd spent $2,000 on their wine cellar last Christmas. My credit card maxed out for their standards. I ignored the text, my pulse steady now, like a soldier prepping for battle. Then came Margaret's call, her voice polished but cold. "James, we're hosting a gala dinner Saturday. You'll need to help set up the patio. Those folding chairs you have won't do. And please, no army stories at the table." I let the voicemail play out, her words a final insult to my 20 years in uniform. I deleted it, my fingers calm, deliberate. I walked to my backyard, where the old fire pit still stood, a relic of nights when Emily and I watched the stars over Victoria. I gathered the bank statements, every receipt of their greed, and lit a match. The papers curled and blackened, 6 years of my life turning to ash in the salty breeze. The flames felt like a cleansing, a rebirth. I wasn't their doormat anymore. Let Margaret and Robert set up their own damn patio. Let Ethan and Lauren face the world without my money holding up their facade. I poured a mug of Tim Hortons coffee, the warmth grounding me, and stood taller than I had in years. This wasn't just about Father's Day, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I was done begging for respect, and I was ready to make them feel the cost of their betrayal. The fire of my resolve still burned as I stood in my Victoria cottage, the Pacific's roar a faint echo through my cracked windows. I, James Campbell, a 62-year-old Canadian Forces veteran, had taken the first step to reclaim my dignity by canceling the $3,000 monthly payments to Ethan and Lauren's Oak Bay mansion, their betrayal erasing Emily's memory, dismissing my service as chaos had pushed me past breaking, but now I was a soldier with a mission. Father's Day was tomorrow, and their gala dinner, hosted for Margaret and Robert's high society friends, was the perfect stage to expose their hypocrisy. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for every sacrifice they'd mocked. My hands were steady as I prepared my weapons, not rifles, but evidence, bank statements, receipts, proof of the $366,000 I'd poured into their lives. I spent the morning organizing my case like a battle plan. On my oak desk, I laid out 6 years of documents, 72 payments of $3,000, totaling $216,000 for their mortgage, a $150,000 second mortgage for their down payment, $8,000 for their chandelier, $5,000 for their cedar hedge. I printed photos from Lauren's Instagram, her Whistler ski trips, their wine cellar stocked with my money, each image a testament to their greed. I packed the evidence into a leather briefcase, the same one I'd carried to Emily's estate meetings, and dressed in my navy suit, pressed crisp, the one I'd worn to her funeral. At 6:30 p.m., I drove the 5 kilometers to their mansion, the Victoria sunset painting the sky in defiant reds. Their street was lined with luxury cars, BMWs, Audi's guests for their Father's Day spectacle. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I saw Lauren playing hostess, her $1,500 silk dress shimmering under my chandelier. The front door was unlocked, a smug nod to their safe Oak Bay neighborhood. I stepped inside, briefcase in hand, the scent of roasted lamb and expensive wine hitting me like a taunt. Laughter spilled from the dining room, where 5 guests sat around a mahogany table I'd helped finance. Margaret's voice rang out, "Oh, Robert, your speech at the gala was divine." I walked in, my boots clicking on the hardwood I'd paid $15,000 to install. The room froze, forks clattering, faces turning shock, confusion, horror. Lauren's wine glass trembled in her hand. Ethan's eyes widened, his face pale as a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice clear as a drill sergeant's command, setting my briefcase on their marble sideboard. "I hope you're enjoying the dinner I helped pay for." Lauren recovered first, her voice sharp. "James, this is unacceptable. Leave now." I opened my briefcase, pulling out the first stack of papers. "Not until your guests know the truth about this house, this lifestyle." I handed a packet to each guest: bank statements, receipts, photos. 6 years, $216,000 in mortgage payments, $150,000 for the down payment, $8,000 for that chandelier above your heads, all from my veteran's pension, while I ate instant noodles to keep their lights on. A woman in pearls gasped, flipping through the documents. "Is this true, Lauren?" she asked, her voice tight. Lauren stammered, "It's complicated." James offered to help. I cut her off, holding up a photo of their Whistler condo. "Offered? I was your bank, Lauren, while you called my service low class, and my wife's memory sentimental." Margaret stood, her face red. "This is outrageous. You're embarrassing yourself, James." I met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Margaret, you're the ones who should be embarrassed. You banned me from Father's Day because my war stories don't suit your elegance. I paid for every inch of this house, yet I'm not good enough for your table." Ethan finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Dad, I didn't mean—" I turned to him, my eyes hard. "You chose their approval over me, Ethan. You let them erase your mother." The room was silent, the air thick with tension. A man in a tailored suit shook his head, staring at the bank statements. "This is disgraceful," he muttered. "You took his money and treated him like this?" I placed the final piece on the table, a copy of Lauren's text demanding scotch for their bar. They even asked me to stock their Father's Day party while telling me to stay away. The guests shifted, their faces a mix of disgust and disbelief. Lauren's composure cracked, her voice shrill. "Get out, James!" I closed my briefcase, my tie straight, my heart pounding with victory. "Enjoy your dinner," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "It's the last one I'll pay for." As I walked out, the murmurs erupted behind me, their perfect facade crumbling like sandcastles against the Pacific tide. The echoes of my Father's Day showdown still rang in my ears as I drove back to my Victoria cottage, the Pacific stars glinting above like the medals I'd earned in Afghanistan. I, James Campbell, a 62-year-old Canadian Forces veteran, had just torn down the facade of Ethan and Lauren's Oak Bay mansion, exposing their greed. $366,000 of my pension and sacrifices to their high society guests. But the battle wasn't over. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Victoria Times Colonist. A headline screamed, "Local veteran abandons family, shames hosts at Father's Day gala." My blood ran cold. The article, penned by a columnist named Fiona Grant, painted me as a bitter, unstable ex-soldier who'd crashed a charitable dinner to humiliate Lauren's parents, Margaret and Robert. It quoted Robert, "James's erratic behavior endangered our guests. At our age, this stress is unacceptable." No mention of my $216,000 in mortgage payments, my $150,000 second mortgage, or their insults about Emily's memory. They'd spun a lie, using Robert's connections as a retired bank executive to smear my name across Victoria. I sat at my oak desk, the same one where I'd planned my first strike, and felt the rage reignite, a fire hotter than a Kandahar blaze. They thought they could bury me in their narrative, just as they'd buried Emily's photo for their aesthetic. But I wasn't the broken man they expected. I was a soldier, trained to outmaneuver the enemy. I opened my laptop and searched Fiona Grant's profile. She was a lifestyle columnist. No ties to veterans. Likely fed this story through Robert's network at the Victoria Golf Club. A quick check confirmed my hunch. Robert and Fiona's editor shared a board seat at a local charity. This wasn't journalism, it was a calculated hit. I wasn't going to let it stand. I called Sarah Thompson, a veteran reporter at CFAX 1070 who'd covered forces stories for years and knew the weight of a soldier's sacrifice. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady as a rifle barrel, "I've got a story for you. Ethan's family smeared me in the Times Colonist after I paid $366,000 for their mansion. I have proof." She listened, her tone sharp with interest. "Send me everything, James. Bank statements, receipts, texts. If this checks out, it's big." I emailed her the dossier I'd shown at the dinner. 72 payments of $3,000, $150,000 for the down payment, photos of Lauren's $1, 500 silk dresses and Whistler trips, all funded by my pension. I included Lauren's text demanding scotch and Margaret's voicemail about no army stories. Sarah called back in hours. "James, this is dynamite. I'm running it tomorrow." The next morning, CFAX 1070 aired Sarah's exposé. Victoria family exploits, veterans' generosity, smears him in media. She detailed every dollar I'd given $366,000 while Lauren and her parents called me low class and erased my late wife's memory. The story hit social media like a Pacific storm, shared by veterans groups across British Columbia. By noon, my phone buzzed with messages from old regiment buddies, outraged on my behalf. "You fought for us, James," one wrote. "Now we're fighting for you." The Times Colonist article was drowned out, its comments section flooded with demands for a retraction. Fiona Grant issued a weak apology, claiming incomplete sources. Robert's charity connections backfired. His golf club pals distanced themselves, unwilling to be tied to his lies. I stood in my cottage, the Pacific breeze slipping through my open window, and felt a surge of triumph. Lauren called, her voice frantic. "James, how could you? Our reputation is ruined." I cut her off, my tone cold. "You made this public, Lauren. You wanted a war, you got one." Ethan texted, pleading, "Dad, I didn't know about the article. Please, let's talk. I didn't reply. Their lies had crumbled under the truth, just like their mansion would without my money. I wasn't just a veteran scorned, I was a man who'd turned their weapons against them. The community, my community, had rallied behind me. This wasn't just my victory. It was a stand for every soldier who'd been disrespected, every sacrifice dismissed. I poured a Tim Hortons coffee and raised it to the horizon. The fight wasn't over, but I was winning. The Pacific breeze swept through my Victoria cottage, carrying the scent of salt and freedom, as I, James Campbell, a 6'2" Canadian Forces veteran, stood taller than I had in years. My Father's Day showdown and the CFAX 1070 exposé had shattered the polished facade of Ethan and Lauren's Oak Bay mansion, exposing their greed. $366,000 of my pension to their high society circle and beyond. The Victoria Times Colonist article that smeared me as an unstable ex-soldier was now a laughingstock, buried under Sarah Thompson's viral story of their betrayal. But the real consequences hit like a coastal storm, and for the first time, I watched from solid ground, unburdened by their weight. 2 weeks after the exposé, a certified letter arrived at my cottage, its stark white envelope marked Notice of Default. Ethan and Lauren's 300 square meter mansion, the one I'd propped up with $216,000 in mortgage payments and a $150,000 second mortgage, was in foreclosure. They owed $9,000 in arrears, with 14 days to pay or lose it all. The bank's words were cold, final, like a judge's gavel. I set the letter on my oak desk, next to a new Tim Hortons mug I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck. I felt no guilt, only clarity. They'd built their castle on my sacrifices, mocking my service and Emily's memory. Now the tide had turned, and they were drowning in their own hubris. Lauren's calls came first, her voice a mix of panic and venom. "James, you've destroyed us!" she shrieked over the phone, the sound crackling through my cottage's quiet. "The bank's taking our home. How could you let this happen?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, the cracked linoleum I was finally fixing gleaming under new lights. "You destroyed yourselves, Lauren," I said, my voice calm as a Victoria dawn. "You took my money, called me low class, and erased my wife. I'm done carrying you." She gasped, then launched into a tirade. "You're a selfish old man. Margaret and Robert are humiliated. Nobody invites us to galas anymore." I hung up, her words fading like a distant squall. Margaret and Robert's social standing, once propped up by their Victoria Golf Club connections, had evaporated. Their charity friends, who'd gasped at my bank statements during the Father's Day dinner, now whispered about their deceit at every Oak Bay brunch. Ethan's knock came a week later, his face haggard, his $2,000 suit wrinkled like his pride. He stood on my porch, the Pacific waves crashing in the distance, and looked like a man who'd lost everything. "Dad," he said, his voice breaking, "we're selling the house. It's over." I didn't know how far Lauren and her parents would go. I stepped aside, letting him into my cottage, now alive with new paint and a repaired roof, small victories I'd earned by cutting their leash. "You knew enough, Ethan," I said, my tone firm but not cruel. "You let them call your mother a nobody. You chose their approval over me." His eyes dropped to the floor, where a new rug covered the scars of years of neglect. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I see that now. But we're broke, Dad. Lauren's leaving me. I don't know what to do." I looked at him, my son, a stranger who'd traded our bond for a mansion. "You'll figure it out," I said, echoing the lessons of my forces days. "Get a job. Live within your means. Stop chasing a life you can't afford." I turned to the window, the Pacific sparkling under a rare June sun. My cottage felt like a home again, not a vault drained by their greed. I'd booked a fishing trip to Tofino, my first vacation in a decade, paid for with money I no longer sent to their Scotiabank account. My phone buzzed with messages from my old regiment buddies who'd rallied behind Sarah's story, inviting me to a Canada Day barbecue at Esquimalt. Their support was a lifeline, a reminder that family wasn't just blood, it was loyalty. Ethan stood, his shoulders slumped, and walked to the door. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said, pausing. "I lost you." I met his gaze, steady as a soldier's. "You didn't lose me, Ethan. You gave me away. There's a difference." He nodded, the weight of his choices sinking in, and left, the door closing with a soft click. I poured a fresh Tim Hortons coffee and stepped onto my porch, the Pacific air warm with promise. Their mansion, their reputation, their lies all crumbling like sandcastles against the tide. I was free, my sacrifices no longer their stepping stones. The future stretched before me, as vast as the ocean, and I was ready to claim it. The Pacific sun rose over my Victoria cottage, casting a golden glow across the freshly painted walls, a stark contrast to the storm of betrayal I'd weathered. I, James Campbell, a 62-year-old Canadian Forces veteran, had reclaimed my life. The Oak Bay mansion, propped up by my $366,000 in sacrifices, was slipping from Ethan and Lauren's grasp, their foreclosure a final reckoning for their greed. Their social facade built on my pension, my pride, and Emily's erased memory had crumbled under the weight of truth, exposed first at their Father's Day gala and then through Sarah Thompson's CFAX 1070 exposé. I stood on my porch, the salt air mingling with the scent of my new Tim Hortons mug, and felt lighter than I had since Afghanistan. My cottage, once a shell drained by their demands, was now a home again, its repaired roof a symbol of my freedom. I'd found a new family, not in blood, but in loyalty. On Canada Day, I joined my old regiment buddies at a barbecue in Esquimalt, their laughter and stories of service wrapping me like a warm blanket. They'd rallied behind me, their texts flooding my phone after the exposé, reminding me that respect is earned through actions, not demanded through entitlement. Ethan's last visit, his broken, "I'm sorry," lingered. But I told him the truth. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to a life where I'm a doormat. The lesson was clear, forged in the pain of betrayal. Set boundaries with those who take you for granted, whether family or not. Respect is an ode, it's built, brick by brick, through loyalty and honor. As a veteran, I'd learned that in combat, and now I'd learned it at home. The Pacific stretched before me, vast and unyielding, like the future I was ready to shape. I'd spent years giving everything to those who gave nothing back. No more. If you've ever fought for your worth, you know this truth. Your value isn't defined by those who dismiss you, but by those who stand beside you. I raised my mug to the horizon, to Emily's memory, to the man I'd become. If this story moved you, please like this video, drop a comment with your own story of standing tall, and subscribe to Maple Revenge. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's honor the fights worth winning, together.